Good evening and welcome to the Monday, July 13th, 2020 Bethel Local Schools Board of Education special meeting in regards to our Facilities Committee. Call to order will be 5:08 p.m. Ms. Reese, could you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Rick Gilbert,
Present.
Justin First,
Present.
Brennan Hattery,
Present.
Chris Mills, Danny Elam,
Here.
Roy Sebastian,
Here.
Julie Reese, here, Caleb Rumpel,
Here.
Chris Mills. He's there, right? You might be on mute, Chris, if you're saying I'm here. Okay.
Number 3, additions to the agenda. Does anyone have any additions to the agenda that's been posted? None at this time. Number 4, communications, meetings, and announcements. Does anyone have any announcements in regards to facilities meetings? None at this time. Okay. Number 5, items for discussion, subcommittee reports. Letter A has to do with temporary swing space in regards to the Will Scott modular units and a status update. If any folks have had an opportunity to drive past the school within the last several days, you will notice a significant amount of work that's taken place behind the building, directly located between the rear of the elementary building and also the bus garage. We've done some preliminary site work prior to Will Scott arriving, removal of a few trees, which we were able to transplant. We've also removed a large section of the permanent fence as well. On Monday, Will Scott was able to come in with their contractors and pour pads for the footers for the buildings. So you can see that located out there. And we've also had 5 of the 9 units delivered as well. They are located in the rear of the student athletic parking lot towards the back of the building as well. So, and then Reliable was here today to begin work on their end as far as electrical connectivity, tying into the circuit panels and breaker boxes in the basement of the elementary building with the upgraded electrical capability that the buildings are going to take. So obviously Reliable, as we mentioned before, is doing the electrical work. They will also be handling a lot of the water hookups as well. So that's kind of where we're at with Will Scott. The project is currently on track and on pace, and we fully expect that the project will be done by the July 31st deadline. And they cautiously were optimistic, as long as the weather holds up, that it potentially could be done a week or 2 prior to that 31st. But we know for sure that'll be done by then, and maybe a little bit earlier. So that'll allow staff enough time to be able to get into their rooms and get rooms set up for the start of the school year. Does anyone have any questions in regards to the modular units? Okay. Letter B has to do with master facilities plan. There was a question or comment that was submitted at our last meeting that we weren't able to get to from a community member. And the question is typed out on the agenda. And it's in regards to the usage of the 5 acres to the south of the current elementary school to avoid traffic from the south crossing current school driveways. This person had a concern in regards to the difficulty in turning left out of the school. And they also made mention of the lack of room on the corner of State Route 201 and Agenbrod Road intersection that can present some dangerous issues as far as travel. So didn't know if anyone had any comments following up in regards to that question or comment from a community member.
You want to ask them order? My thoughts are it's not enough space, right? We need probably, OFCC recommends 20 acres. I mean, I like the thinking, you know, she's thought out the traffic patterns and stuff, but I don't think there's enough space there. And I'm not sure you could continue to put things in that corner when we've got the other space. You know, is it all going to be, we have traffic issues now going around the buildings and stuff. So I don't know though, maybe Levin Porter has some thoughts on.
Levin Porter had 19 acres set aside, correct? For
I think it
elementary
was 20
building.
is what the, yeah.
19 to 20.
Mike and Mark, what do you anticipate for the amount of acreage that the upcoming K through 5 building will sit on?
Yeah, it should be about 19 or 20 acres. You know, so there's not enough room on the south side of the current building to really do anything currently.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Mark. We would also be doing a traffic study to look at really the entire site, and from that traffic study, they'll give recommendations of how to improve traffic flow, whether that means improvements to some of the roads or turning lane or whatnot. And there is an allowance in the OFCC budget of 300,000 to address some of those things. It may not address them 100%, but once school's back in session and we can have somebody come out and do a traffic study to evaluate that and kind of give us some guidance on what improvements are needed, really from both standpoints here of traffic separation, but then also getting in and out of the site from some of these roads.
Mike and Mark, just I guess a friendly reminder. I know you guys probably mentioned this previously, but I can't remember. What, from start to finish, how long does it typically take for an accurate traffic study to take place?
Oh, I mean, they're going to be out there observing. You know, I don't know if they do that for a week or so. But probably to get the study is probably a month or two.
Okay.
I would say somewhere in that time range. So once school gets started, I think we'd want to do that. I don't think that was one of the things that Valerie said we needed to wait to do to still have it be co-funded. So I think we could really, when school gets started, you know, assuming that we're kind of starting back up and not have, you know, a partial or whatever, you know, depending on how things happen in the fall, they'll have to take all that in advisement anyways. You know, obviously we're going to be increasing our capacity, so they have some things to factor in, even if not everybody's coming to school at the beginning.
Yeah, it would be interesting, depending upon, you know, what's finalized or decided with our potential reopening plan.
Right.
Depending upon how that looks like, there is the possibility to potentially see more parents drive their children to school at the start of the school year because of what's going on.
Right. Yeah, they're going to have to take that into consideration when they do that. Obviously, they don't know what the normal flow is. So, but again, I think that's what they get paid to do, is to come up with some of those scenarios. They're obviously going to have contact with you guys and kind of get a sense too of where things would normally be in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, they'll want your typical kind of bus ridership patterns, and you know, if you know how many kids are on, you know, ride the buses from the community versus how many kids come to school via cars typically.
Okay, sounds good. Does anyone else have any questions or comments in regards to the traffic study or the question in regards to the location of the building? North versus south? Okay. All right, we'll move on to number 2. Number 2 has to do with essentially phase 1, phase 2 construction and options. This is kind of where Mike and Mark can take over a little bit and talk a little bit about the items that you wanted to address this evening, and then also some of those preliminary plans that you shared with us and I was able to share with, I believe, the facilities committee and also the board.
Yeah, we continue to add detail to the master site plan. I think the latest one that we sent to you, Justin, really, hones in on where the stadium wants to be, since that's going to be the first project kind of implemented. And it looks like the stadium really wants to be close to the existing school as much as possible. So we are leveraging the location of that current parking lot behind the school, putting that stadium just north of there, and then slightly shifted to the north, or to the west of the parking lot, and slightly shifted to the north. That keeps it as proximate as we can to the existing school, while still leveraging accessibility to the north of the property to try to take advantage of circulation patterns going to the new K-5 site. We've also indicated on that plan potential future additional parking that would be in conjunction, basically built right next to that existing parking if that's ever a need. So we're kind of adding detail to that, looking at site circulation, and still considering that whole northwestern portion of that site, future athletic fields, future school site. So I don't think anything has really changed in terms of the overall site organization. At this point, we're adding detail. One thing to note, we are indicating a future baseball field next to that softball field just to the west of the existing stadium, which would be possibly converted into a JV or practice field, so that all of that infrastructure remains. But again, this is just kind of a continuing addition of detail for the master plan. Any questions, comments?
Just from my own perspective, and this is only my own thoughts, I do like how the stadium is centrally located. I think it looks like it's a good look on my part. It looks like it's a good location from the existing to potential new, so that it's not too far located from any of the future sites or current existing sites. But those are just my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still looking, more specifically at that proposed stadium location. So it may shift a little bit within that kind of box that we've kind of drawn. Some of the things that we need to look at are, more specifically the soil conditions out there. Maybe there's a pocket of high rock that we want to avoid, to possibly avoid additional costs. But that would be kind of the next step, is looking at some additional soil borings in that general vicinity. I looked at the preliminary borings that were done a few years ago by CBC, and the rock is about 6.5 feet below grade, and then there is one area where it's about 13.5 feet below grade. So that actually is good news, because our foundations would not be nearly that deep. The only thing that we would want to be sure of is to look at the relative grades for any storm drainage, sanitary sewers and things of that nature, and see what the implications are for potentially needing to excavate the rock for utilities.
Mike, so you'll just divert the creek around the stadium?
Yeah, I mean, we don't, we kind of looked at this, and we looked at that relative to the location of the stadium. And if we took that stadium out of the creek, let's say we shifted it farther north, outside of that drainage area, we would have to provide parking for that stadium around that. And, looking at the costs of an additional parking spot or additional parking lot versus the necessary storm drainage around that, it was really kind of a wash. So all things being equal, we decided, well, hey, where does this stadium really want to be? And, in order to still be functional with the existing school that's going to be there for at least another 10 years, it will function as your high school and your middle school for the next 10 years. It really wants to be by that school. And we thought that the current location that we're showing, even though we'd have to spend a little bit more money on the storm drainage around the stadium, was really, it was really kind of balanced it out versus the additional parking that we'd have to put around the stadium if we moved it further to the north. So we thought that this was the best location. It also kind of, clears that area on the north side of the site. It gets it out of any potential other development as well.
Right. And you're adding more parking for the existing building as well, which is badly needed.
Well, right now, we're not proposing to add any additional parking. We're using that existing parking lot as it is right now in phase 1, and using that just as it is for events. We would propose possible future parking if needed for larger events. So let's say, 10 years down the road, or even 5 years down the road, you discover, hey, we really need to expand this parking area for some, for other events. Then you have that option. So the plan really is to kind of create as much flexibility for future growth there as possible.
All right, thanks.
Is there just I guess a question in trying to figure out setup wise with the way it's currently located, the home side would be further away from the current building. Is there a way to potentially look at it to have it go east and west instead of north and south?
We could do that. It seems like the north-south orientation.
It's just a thought. I guess I'm just curious.
Yeah. I mean, we could look at that. I don't know what your thoughts are, Mark, on that.
Well, part of it,
That would help with sun also. I mean, I know a lot of times as you're watching the game, you're watching that setting sun there, and you've got it blinding your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, as far as the students go, we're looking at locker rooms at the south end of the facility. So, if we were to rotate this, that would really put the locker rooms and everything the farthest away from the school, at least on a what you're using, day in and day out, not for game days, because you would still, because the other side of the stadium on the north side currently is going to be where concessions and restrooms and ticket booths are. So that's kind of your entry area. So when we try to rotate that, we're going to want that be front and center, which puts the locker rooms at the farthest. But we can look at we'll probably even do a solar study to kind of show you the effects of it, whether it's rotated in that current location or turned 30 degrees or 90 degrees or whatever, to really show you what the effects are. We've got software that can do that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, just throwing an idea out there.
Yeah.
I would know that stuff way more than I do, so.
I think once we take a look at that, though, we do want to think seriously about getting some additional soil borings in this area once we get the plan kind of figured out for that, specifically for the stadium.
Okay. Julie, do you have a question?
All right, yeah, this is Julie. So I play devil's advocate every week. I guess I'm going to continue my role. So, yeah, I have some questions and some things. I'm a little disappointed with the one page. I thought that you were going to provide some options for us that would show different possibilities of maybe where the schools and the athletics would be located. So I'm wondering, because, and also one where it might show the high school being a separate building. I know we can't submit that to the OCC, but we kind of believe we're headed in that direction if we can, you know, when we reevaluate the numbers, they support it. So I'm a little disappointed we didn't get more options. And then for these things, I guess I was hoping to see maybe an option in the athletics, because we talked about putting them out back of the school and some of the bigger area of the land, an option where maybe the locker rooms and concessions and parking could be shared between the various athletic fields. So maybe there's a central, you know, point, so we don't have to keep building all these extra buildings. I also don't see a future soccer field on here. And I didn't know softball was going to stay in the same place. I mean, I guess it can. I just don't see any options on that either. And is it possible to, so for the changing the stadium east to west, or whichever, you know, changing it. The one thing that is the sun is in the player's eyes part-time, so I don't know what's better there.
Well,
I mean,
the way this is drawn, the sun would be at the home side back.
Right, I understand, but I'm saying if you switch it so that the end zones are east and west, then
One team
is always going to be playing into the
Gotcha.
sun.
Yeah.
So it's just, who do you want to inconvenience and
The visitors.
what's better for it? Yeah, but they switch ends.
I'm just kidding.
No, I got you. No, I'm with you. I just wanted to point that out because we had talked about that before when we talked about reversing the size on the existing one. Also, is there going to be parking out in front of the building is called the Future Edition. It only shows future parking in the back. Is there going to be parking in the front?
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. There's certainly room out there, and we've configured the circulation to do that. But that future edition, you know, all of the planning for that, we've got the room for the parking for the addition. And the block that we're showing as a future edition is, you know, larger than the addition that we would need for that. So it's got, you know, some extra space in it. But, you know, the plan really is that we would plan that all out, you know, later down the road when that addition comes into play, say 10 years, you know, when funding is available from OFCC.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking though, I was just asking because I think we need to have the vision, right? We need to be able to visualize how it's going to be rather than just putting the building there. And then on the, so I mentioned, I don't see a soccer field on here. What about practice fields? Like I kind of thought we were going to map out how the athletic part would look. And, you know, maybe show some more of that.
That whole blue area could be however many practice fields we want. Obviously, it's set up that if, you know, we did do another school there, it could be there and could work with that. But I mean, you could probably, we looked at some soccer fields. What did we get, 12?
No, it was like a lot. I mean, you could develop that entire area, you know, for a complete soccer, baseball, football complex. You know, and
I'm just saying for visualization purposes, it would be nice if we could map out part of that, right? Just to say, at least show one of everything and how it would fit in there and where the buildings would be for the locker rooms and the concessions and the entry.
Yeah.
Like what kind of the vision is. And then for the K through 5 site, is that 20 acres on here?
Yes.
Okay, so we lost some detail there before it had a building on it, but it doesn't show any detail either, like where's the building, where's the playground gonna go, parking, that kind of thing. And then is it maybe some other options for that, like could we turn that sideways as well to leave more room for maybe a separate high school in the middle there? What would it be like if the K-5 site was down on the corner, not the corner, but the, as far down, as far west as it can go on Agenbrod Road? Like, is that a possibility? You know, because that might help with traffic if it was a little farther away instead of, we kind of continue to put, I mean, we put more athletics in the corner again. And so everything seems to be in the corners. Can we see
I'll be honest with you, I'm having a little hard time hearing you, but I'm gonna try to answer what I think your questions
looking
were.
at the screen like I'm looking at you, but the microphone's the other way. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's fine. I think we heard most of it. As far as the K-5 site, if part of the reason that it's put in the corner is so you get access from both Agenbrod and 201. And so you have a better flow of in and out traffic if we kind of can hit those two major roads. If we push it to the west on the site, really what it does is we were trying to leave the biggest possible site available in the event that you do decide, hey, we do want to have a separate high school building and give you the largest area, because the high school site's going to want to be what, 50, 60 acres or more. So
For that block.
by pushing the K-5 site to the west really screws that up unless you push it all the way to the back corner, to the northwest corner. And so that's kind of the reasoning for where it is. Obviously in that blue area, we can show all kinds of sites. We can, as far as the fields are concerned, we can look at the stadium in different directions, but I think somebody said when they were talking about it, right now, the way it's set up is your sun is a problem for the visitor fans, not really for the players and not for the home stand. So that's a typical arrangement. But obviously we could have shown however many different configurations. The K-5 site, we haven't shown the building or the playground or the parking lot. We know it's going to be in that area. But once we start, and we could show something conceptually, but once, that's only good for whatever it is. We haven't met with anybody to, your staff, your admin, the board, to really talk about the actual design of that space. So right now we just try to keep it generic and say, this is the corner of the site that we're looking at.
We also want to, get the traffic study to kind of help us determine what access is going to be needed for that K-5 site. So that's kind of a piece of the puzzle that's a pretty important one.
Okay, so let me just ask you a couple things. So for the traffic of coming off both roads, you could still do that, right? It would just be a longer road out to 201, along the driveway from the school out to 201. So that doesn't prevent you from having traffic coming in from both roads by moving the school. And the second thing is the 50 to 60 acres of the high school. I thought last time you said the majority of that would be the athletics, which will be behind it basically, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the high school site can be right along Agenbrod, and then the fields could be developed behind that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, which would just mean with that K-5 site, if we're moving it, we would want to probably move it all the way to the corners, just so you have. So that's not, if we put the K-5 site in the middle, then you've got your playgrounds on the other. You might, if you have the high school in the corner,
then you'd have to go on the other side of the K-5 school site to access some of the play fields potentially, so.
Right, I agree with that.
Mike, this is Lori Sebastian. I really like that you put the stadium site close to our existing parking lot. But we do need to find a place for the practice fields because that's important to our kids.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little more? I know you said the drainage would have to be redone, but I believe there's drainage to the north of the school now, maybe a retention pond. And the driveway into the school, what kind of costs and what kind of issues are we looking at to redo that?
To redo the driveway into the existing school.
Yes.
It's kind of hard to know at this point. I mean, all of that development cost related to site circulation, we could probably take some of that out of that $300,000 allowance. But the site development costs really are co-fundable. Any kind of drives that you have related to that K-5 site and reconfiguration of the surrounding drives are really co-fundable pieces. And it's just, without knowing what the impacts are from the study, from a traffic study, what changes we would need to make out at that entrance onto 201, it's kind of hard to say.
Well, all that stuff is not within the footprint of the K-5 site, right?
Correct.
So we really wouldn't be impacting it to start with. We would really only get to that when we get to the next phase of the project. So, and that would be part of the construction costs associated with that addition to the school, and we kind of address it there. We would want to do things so that when we develop the K-5 site, we have that ability to either augment that to make it bigger to accommodate some of those things, or push that detention area to a different portion of the site. So we do kind of have to keep that in mind, but to start with, the drive coming into the school and that existing detention area are really not going to be affected by our construction.
Okay, so those would be part of the later plan, but Danny
Yeah.
had asked a question, I think, about there's like a stream or a river kind of through the property. Is the proposed stadium across that or not at all?
Yeah, the proposed stadium basically is along that drainage swale.
Okay.
That's right there. It's there's some development costs there, but looking at that related to additional parking that we'd have to build, if we moved that stadium further north, it was really a wash.
Yeah, if we put the stadium on the other side of the site,
No pun intended.
yeah, you've got drives to get to there. You would have no parking. We need we still need utilities for restrooms and the other, locker rooms and all that kind of stuff. So the farther we start moving it out, we start really adding a whole lot of cost just to get it over there. Without, and plus you're moving everything farther away from the current school. So every time somebody's going out there to the fields or whatever, they've got to go much farther. And, we're expecting that this is going to be the case for the next 8 to 10 years. So that's part of the reason it's central to the site. It gives you that flexibility of what it's going to be for the next decade. And then, yes, we set it up for potential that you could have a separate high school site. But really that's not the master plan. The master plan is a 2-building site. And so, I think we have to plan for it that this may be the only way that it is. So, we've built in the flexibility that it could be changed, but we really want to make sure that this works because we could do this and it could never change. Even though we think it might change, it could be this way all the time. And I don't think you really want a stadium that's, acres away, thinking that something else was going to happen and it never happens.
I agree, and I really appreciate you thinking about what we're gonna need in the immediate and the, the 3-year from now plan, as well as 10 years from now. Like I said, I was just concerned, I just was trying to visualize this. So whatever you do with the drainage, you will make it work for if you have to redo the, if we do a future edition where you've located, you will make that work for now and for the future, so we won't be spending
Yes.
additional funds. Okay, good.
Yeah,
That was my concern.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that has to happen like that.
Okay.
I mean, we can't just, plop this down and just kind of like, let things go. That's integral to what we're doing.
Well, and we planned back in 2014, that's why the retention pond was put so far north. The hope was that there would be enough space there to develop, but you can't always predict. So,
Right. Right.
but I know parking's expensive, I know asphalt's expensive, and I like that you've tried not to expand, create more parking lots than we need.
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah, and even when we do an addition, it could be a 2-story addition. That footprint could be a whole lot smaller than what it is. I think we're just thinking of kind of, I don't want to call it worst case, but a sizable addition on there. And that's, Mike's got it shown as just a big block. Never is the building just a nice rectangle like that. It'd be nice to easy build like that, but it never happens that way. So, we just tried to show an area, and it just coincides with how big the K5 site is, so that we see what we need to. That's not to say that even that K5 site couldn't be rotated and kind of had the long way, maybe more on Egg Broad instead of 201. So again, we're trying to just narrow down where that site is, give an idea of some flow, figure out where the right location is for that stadium. We looked at it, and I know we only showed one version here, but I think we looked at about 6 or 7 different ones, and really just none of the other ones made sense from a logistical standpoint, and it starts to be cost prohibitive. So this to us was the best location. We've had the stadium where the K5 site was too.
Mm-hmm.
As another option. It doesn't, that hurts you more if you wanted to do a future school site somewhere else. But that's probably in the area that we would want to have the stadium, though, is somewhere close to the existing school, because it's going to be that way for the next decade. Got all quiet.
Anyone else have any questions for Mike or Mark?
So we're not gonna see any other options, is that my understanding? You guys got to see 6 or 7 options, we got to see 1.
I mean, we can show you the other options that we, kind of looked at in terms of, things that we were considering. And if you want to, we can go ahead and put, a potential building on, a couple of these sites, with the understanding that, the current master plan, as Mark said, is basically the K5 and then a future addition on the existing school. So, I mean, we can certainly lay out, some things and kind of describe where we looked at the K5 site and then the proposed stadium. But I think ultimately, once you look at every option, you'll probably come to the conclusion that, where we're showing it is best for the current master plan, as well as any future adjustments to that master plan. Say, a high school, if enrollment projections are, through the roof in 10 years.
Yeah, we could have shown them. We did meet with the athletic director a week or 2 ago, and kind of talk through some of these, and really, that's what got us to this point here and talking about his vision for the stadium, and that's what this is really crafted towards. But yeah, we can show you some of the other options that were being considered, and we could probably put together a pros and cons list for each of those sites, so that you could see some of them. So we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and put those together.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to wait till next meeting.
No.
We'll get those together. They're probably not to this level of development, but we can share those possibly sometime this week or
Yeah.
maybe sometime next week.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I think I got about 20 different studies that I did, and we could probably share with you.
Well, I thought in the last meeting, we talked about putting the athletics, behind everything. So I don't know, I'd just like to see some of the other things mapped out, including some practice fields. Because all of these are gonna be far away from the buildings because we're talking about putting the buildings along 201. So, I mean, there's no option other than walking a far distance. And maybe it won't be in the next 10 years, but eventually those fields are gonna be far away from the building.
Yeah, keep in mind, you'll still have the existing stadium to use as practice if needed.
Right, I understand. I'm just saying for future ball fields and
Sure.
you know,
Sure.
20, 30 years from now, not 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and there's nothing that says in 20 to 30 years, let's say your enrollment projection is right on target with OHCC and you need some additional practice fields. There's nothing that says you can't develop further practice fields to the north of where we're proposing the stadium, right along an access drive. That'd be kind of like easy access for practice fields. And then the rest of that field, could just remain blank if needed, or developed, into a soccer complex, and you can charge admission or something like that.
What about the 5 acres to the south? Or something like that?
Yeah, that's a little bit more problematic down there. It's not really big enough to do a whole lot with. I mean, you could put a practice field down there, where that playground is. It's kind of not, it's just not big enough, and with the existing circulation running through there, it's a little problematic.
Okay.
And can I just ask one other clarification? I just want to make sure I understood this correctly. You said the cost is a wash for putting in additional parking versus moving the swale, the drainage swale for the stadium as it's proposed on here. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at, the location of that stadium further north to get out of the drainage swale. I mean, we'd still have to develop storm drainage for the stadium, no matter where we put it. But looking at, kind of a more global, larger storm sewer scheme, because we're putting it in kind of the major swale, right through the site. The cost of redeveloping that swale, diverting that swale around the proposed stadium where we're currently showing it, versus adding the additional parking that would be needed if we took that stadium out of that swale and to the north, was pretty much a wash.
And so when you say north, you mean on the other side of the existing swale?
Correct. Yeah, closer to where that existing house is.
Right, okay.
Yeah, because at that point we have no parking. So now we have to add all the parking for the stadium.
What about the elementary school parking? Wouldn't it be relatively close if the stadium?
You don't get a whole lot of you get staff parking with a K-5 site, but you don't have student parking or a whole lot of else. So, you're really not going to have a huge parking lot associated with that K-5 site.
and OFCC wouldn't co-fund it.
So we just have to be cognizant of that. And if, you know, if we did similar where we've got parking along 201 and Agenbroad, you know, it's not going to be conveniently located either for the stadium if it was, even if the stadium is just west of the K5 site.
Mike, do you have a proposed seating number for this stadium?
Yeah, we sure do. Based off of our conversation with Damon, we're proposing 1,500 seats on the home side and around 500 seats on the visitor side, and that's changeable, you know, if there is a different need.
Okay. I saw your future parking tag on that proposed block there, and our stadium now, I would assume it's way smaller than what you're proposing. 800.
Yeah.
It's half the size. When we have a full house, like homecoming or something like that, we already don't have enough parking for this. I would think that the reason I thought that is because I thought that future parking might be included because this isn't even big enough for our small stadium.
Well, I think we will need some parking, additional parking when we do this because we're adding capacity to the stadium. So what we didn't want to do is duplicate everything. So not only for some future, but for the existing. So I think maybe that's the miscommunication here is we will need we will need additional parking for the capacity of the stadium because we're going from what I think 863 now to 2,000.
That's correct.
So, you know, we're obviously a little more than doubling the capacity. So we will need additional parking, whether that all comes on line day one. I guess you could potentially phase it in, but what we didn't want to do is if we move the stadium to a point where you're not connected to any of that parking, is now instead of adding parking for 1,000 or so, now we're adding parking for 2,000. So that was kind of what really needed to be the discussion there is.
All right, so
we
really
want to take advantage of what's existing there,
right.
supplement it for this stadium. It also kind of keeps that parking all together for some of the other amenities.
Sure. When we have elementary music programs in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
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 So that additional parking obviously could be a gravel lot, at first.
Yes. Yeah, as long as we get in buy-in from the zoning folks.
Mike, one other thing I would really, really like to see on this proposal, besides the practice soccer fields, is I know we're not talking about doing an auditorium now, but I think it needs penciled in because hopefully at some point in the next 20 years, we could look at potentially putting an auditorium in that would,
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about that too, because this plan really shows what is happening between now and 10 years from now. And then after that 10 years, let's say OFCC money comes in at 10 years, it's likely you're going to have, the future addition plus, demolition of a portion of the existing building. And, where we see that, a potential auditorium or, art center or something, that's really that area all the way to the south, where that includes that 5 acres. We see that kind of being developed at that time in the future for those items. So, there's going to be flexibility, in the plan for those as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wondered because I'm like, I didn't want to get everything sandwiched in and be like, oh, we didn't leave space for, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And what we could do is pretty much show like, this plan, which is for the next, 0 to 10 years, maybe 20 years, and then kind of a next possible phase, which would include maybe the high school and then maybe an art center on the south, just to show, hey, we've got area for these in the plan if circumstances change or additional money becomes available to build or to develop those kind of things.
So when we do that, let's do it.
This is Jacob. I just had a quick question. Looking for permission, Mr. Firks?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I just thought you were going to ask it. Go
We're
ahead.
waiting.
Yeah. Being I'm a spectator, right?
You're good. Go ahead.
It says on mute. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The question I have is where you have the future baseball and where the softball field is, right? So that future baseball is where all our practice happens kind of now, right? The soccer and football. That it would make more sense to kind of move the softball and that baseball field out of there into some of that blue space and then leave that area for open green space that will assist in education as well as any other practice or band or anything else in that space. That's what would make sense to me with a pass through the stadium site.
Yeah. Yeah, we looked at that too, because we looked at putting that baseball field in a number of different locations on the site. And, again, to kind of show it in this location, it's the same issue with the stadium, really occurs at the baseball field. You're going to need parking with the baseball field. So we decided, hey, let's show it in this location because it's more convenient for the events and relative to the parking. The practice fields can go just about anywhere. And, if they want it to be, to the north of the proposed stadium or to the west of the proposed stadium in the blue area, that's certainly a possibility. But in terms of the functions for the, the core games and things like that, those really wanted to be clustered around that parking area and proximate to the school. But we can show you in the other options we've got different locations for those that we kind of, studied.
Yeah, that's the cheapest location is to put the baseball next to softball since we're not moving the softball.
Yeah.
It's obviously going to be cheaper to develop a practice field than it is to duplicate a softball field or a baseball field somewhere else. So, and I don't know that we were thinking that the baseball was a 20-year plan. I think it may be sooner than it may not be year 1 or 2, but we definitely didn't think that because of the cost of developing that baseball, about what, 350, 400,000, somewhere in that range, that it has the potential of being much sooner than what, even waiting for the second phase of construction for the schools happening. So that's why we showed it there to begin with, thinking that, you've got yourself basically a little softball, baseball complex. But yeah, like Mike said, we almost have an infinite way of showing these in some of that blue area. We've not shown anything in the woods, the green area, thinking that you may still want to use that for some of your outdoor learning options. It's some of the few greens, wooded spaces. So on the site, instead of going in and cutting all that down, but you could obviously at some point in time, if you really wanted to, clear that whole area and give yourself more area to work with. You can hear this.
Does anyone else have any additional questions for Mike or Mark? You guys want to move on to next steps, or what do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
Okay. Next steps will be, Mike and Mark, if you guys could send us those options to me via email, I'll forward them on to facilities committee and also board members.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yep.
Brennan and I will be, hopefully tomorrow, working on some RFQs. So I'll give you guys a phone call tomorrow to talk a little bit about that as well. And then, do you have anything else in the immediate that you guys need from us?
No, we'll send over the options, make sure that we're on the right track. Like we said, we would like to start getting some soil borings associated with whatever option we're looking at for the stadium. The ones for the school can wait until we're closer to that. There's not a huge need for those to begin with. And, you know, the stadium, our goal is to get it ready for next season. Is that right? Yeah, it won't be ready for track. We don't think it'll be ready for track next spring, but should be able to be ready for football next fall, as long as we don't wait too long to get started on it. So
Yeah, I would anticipate that we'll get hopefully RFQs publicized for that, hopefully the next day or so.
okay, I've got a follow-up document for when you get a short list that I can provide to you. I'll need to get that over to you tomorrow.
Okay.
So that's after this first one. When you make a short list, you're gonna want to give them some other qualifying data to consider.
So a quick question for you. I've been involved in this process through OFCC directly, but not necessarily ELP. In past experiences, OFCC would come down and assist with selection of construction manager at risk type companies. Would you recommend that for the ELP as well, or would they not be willing to do that?
I don't think they're involved in any of that. I don't know that you need them to help you in that assistance. Now, we can be a part of that. Typically, even with OFCC projects, so like Northridge, I sat in all the interviews for the construction manager. I gave my opinion. I was not a voting member or anything like that. We could do something similar if you want, or we've worked with most of them, so we have a good handle on each of the different firms' strengths and weaknesses. But and I'm sure we're probably biased in some cases with certain firms, but you know, we can assist in that and even give you some guidelines of, you know, what to look out for. Ultimately, it's your decision. It's not ours. We can provide some recommendations, but it's really who, in the end, you'll feel comfortable with. You know, I'm sure that as you go through, everybody, in most cases, just about everybody submitting for it is probably qualified to do the job. There are some that do a whole lot more work around here than others. Some that are more familiar with OFCC projects, because you still need to go through some of that, even though they're really not heavily involved in the process. You do need somebody that knows what all the rules are, so that you don't get screwed out of getting recompensated for some of this work. So, but yeah, we can help out. I don't think OFCC engages in that. I don't think they're spending any of their money as part of this, other than the phase submissions. But I don't know that. I'm not 100% sure that that's a true statement, though.
Yeah, I was just curious because the last project that I was involved in indirectly was our career center project up back home. And maybe that was because it was career tech and it was a different animal, but they actually came up and assisted all the local superintendents and also the career center director, et cetera, in the selection of our construction. So I didn't know if that was different with Career Tech or not.
I know Career Tech does have some different rules, but we can obviously reach out to Valerie and find out if that's something that they would be willing to participate in, if that's really what you want.
Okay, I was just curious. I guess my wheels were spinning and I was thinking of questions. So
Sure.
all right, so that's kind of next steps on our end. If anyone else doesn't have any other questions, do we have any hearing in the public at all? Does it look like we have any? Do any of the committee members that are zooming in have any additional questions at all?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
This drawing that you provided, the master plan site study, is this what goes in the master plan? Sorry, could you hear me?
We're having trouble hearing it if that was a question for us.
Yeah, sorry. The question is the master plan site study drawing that you provided to us today.
Yeah.
Is that part of the master facility plan? Does it become part of that document?
It's a document that augments the master facilities plan that would go to OFCC. They don't necessarily require that plan, but if your question is what is needed for OFCC, they require the board resolutions and then the approved master plan, and they're going to send you a whole packet of information that they're going to need.
Okay. When do we get that? That should be pretty soon, right?
Well, we got to wait for the new numbers to come out. And then once we figure out exactly what our budget's going to be, that kind of, kicks the process into high gear. Once we get that budget established, then there'd be a board resolution to proceed with an ELK project. And Valerie will help us guide you guys through that process.
Yeah, I would think that it's probably sometime in August, because we're going to go ahead and tell them at that point, hey, yes, we're going to do the K-5 school, and they really put together all the documents for them to go to that board resolution, and then all that stuff then goes to the commission once it's signed. So, but yeah, we're really waiting. I think for the new
numbers,
the new
eligibility ranking.
Thank you, to come out to see where your percentage is. So that'll establish all the costs of what's a local share versus state share.
Yeah.
And then that'll all kind of come together all at once.
And we're really working backwards from the October commission, because the October commission is when the ELK master facilities plan would be approved, and all the contracts figured out at that point.
Yeah, so it may even be early September that the board is signing that resolution.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We'll confirm those dates for you so that everybody's on the same page.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Doesn't appear that we have any comments from the hearing of the public. Our next meeting is scheduled for August 10th, 2020 at 5:00 p.m. Could I have a motion to adjourn? A motion. Have a second?
I'll second.
Who is that?
Rick.
Is that Rick? Okay.
Ms. Reese, can you call the roll, please?
Yeah. Rick Gilbert,
Yes.
Justin Burke,
Yes.
Brendan Hattery,
Yes.
Chris Mills,
Yes.
Danny Eno, Lori Sebastian.
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Julie Reed, yes. Caleb Runkle,
Yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned at 6:13 PM. After Brian logs off, I did want to have a short conversation with the committee members and also